Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to cover the tier 2 character selector because a ton of you have already asked me, and I'm sure there are many more that are wondering what my advice is for selecting a character out of this list. Just to keep in mind, for starters, it only includes farmable characters, bioselector characters, and the A-Force, so it does not include premium characters like Biosubscription, X-Men. Obviously, it doesn't include native tier 2s, doesn't include the ultimates. So we do have a limited roster to choose from. We don't have absolutely everyone, and you can scroll to the end if you want to see exactly who is left off the list. But of course, the majority of this video is going to be focused on who to actually choose from the list. Also keep in mind, if you already have the character at tier 2 and you just want more bios of theirs for a uniform, you'll get 256 bios, as it's telling me right now for Ghost Rider. So my general advice for the tier 2 character selector before I get into the more detailed stuff is to choose someone that you're going to be happy with. If you are happy with the character, if you have fun with them, if they're fun to play, if you like them in the comics, generally speaking, probably you're not going to regret your decision. But if you want to take a more meta approach, if you want to choose something that's going to be efficient and is going to serve you well into the coming months, especially if you're not yet a veteran with most characters tier 2, then I'm going to outline some tips for you, generally speaking. I didn't want to make a list of characters like top 10 best tier 2 selector characters, because it doesn't work that way. Because there's so many characters to choose from, and because everyone's roster is different, I could just create a list of top 10, but then I'm leaving out all of those players who already have those 10 characters at tier 2, and they're just gonna close the video because it's boring for them, and I want everyone to watch, and I want to give advice to everyone, so I'm gonna do it a bit differently. So the first piece of advice I have for you, or the first question you should ask yourself if you've narrowed it down to a list of, let's say, 5 or so characters. Let's say you're considering Shuri, Hulk, Singularity, Robbie Reyes, and Hela. Let's just say, for example. My first question that I would ask myself, or that you should ask yourself, is what does your roster lack? So instead of taking a look at the characters that you can choose that you don't have, go back to your roster and look at the characters that you do have. If you don't have a full roster yet, especially in terms of your tier 2s, then you might start to see some holes in your roster once you start to break them down by, let's say, type. So, for example, you could go and see, okay, how many tier 2 blast characters do I have? How many tier 2 speed, combat, and universal? And right there you might notice, wow, I'm really lacking any good speed tier 2 characters, which means you should probably choose Shuri. That's a pretty decent option. That's going to serve you in basically every game mode because it gives you flexibility in your roster, which is basically what you want. Now, of course, this game has almost too many options at this point with 160 characters on the verge, but it's still good if you're the type of person that's building your roster to make sure that you try to keep things balanced. It helps you in World Boss, it helps you in World Boss Ultimate, helps you in Shadowland, helps you in Conquest, Timeline. It basically helps you everywhere. So that's the first piece of advice that I have is find out what your roster is missing. You can break it down by type, by gender. You can break it down by superhero versus supervillain. I find a lot of people accidentally neglect supervillains and then realize, you know what, maybe I do really need Hela because she's not the best character, but I do really need a villain. And you know what, a universal villain is even rarer because I don't have any of the Black Order built up. I don't have Dormammu. I don't have Thanos. And suddenly they're picking Loki or Hela. And don't be ashamed to choose a character that you can farm for. I mean, choosing a 1-star Loki and immediately getting him tier 2 is super valuable. Yeah, there are going to be people that are going to judge you or say that it's inefficient, and it technically is inefficient to use this selector for a character that you can farm for free with no items invested, but all that time and all that energy that you're going to invest in Loki, you could just invest it in another character, and in the meantime you can start Loki down the path of, let's say, building him up for Supergiant World Boss Ultimate. The second piece of advice I have for you, and I've mentioned it a couple times already, is World Boss Ultimate. I want you, when you're selecting these characters and you're thinking about weighing the options for your tier 2s, think about which characters like Loki, like She-Hulk, Shuri, and Coulson, because Valkyrie's not available, which of those characters you might need for World Boss Ultimate, because we know that Netmarble is planning a shakeup for World Boss Ultimate we have a pretty good indication that World Boss Ultimate is going to be where we get the new Tier 3 resources in some way, at least from their teasers. And while I'm not 100% sure, it's not a bad idea to sort of World Boss Ultimate proof your roster so that when the update lands, if you know you needed them, you needed those buff up support characters like Coulson, like She-Hulk, you have them and you're not kind of left out in the cold. Now, it is a bit of a risk to choose those characters because generally speaking they are not useful otherwise. She-Hulk is not a character that you can send out on her own. She's not going to do things for you solo. I mean, she can do low-level Shadowlands. I've made her work, but it's definitely a struggle. Same thing with Coulson. He's probably the worst one on this list. Shuri's probably the only safe bet here. She's an amazing character by herself, and she just happens to have a really badass Tier 2 passive that puts her in the conversation with Coulson and Valkyrie, although Coulson's technically the strongest one, but the least flexible. And she also has the most potential out of the three because she has a very powerful uniform. Coulson's uniform is pretty trash, and She-Hulk's uniform is only useful for the leadership for Extreme Alliance battle, so it's very one-dimensional. But that would be the second question that I would ask myself if I were you. Which of these characters will I potentially use for World Boss Ultimate? Because you're going to need those Tier 3 mats one way or another. We're all going to need them. The third question I would ask myself if I were you in choosing a prospective character to Tier 2 is, who is good for Shadowland? Shadowland is not only the most fun game mode in Marvel Future Fight, but it's also the game mode that gives you the best return for your money. So if you're around stage 10, around stage 15, but you're struggling, it's not a bad idea. Again, even if it's a semi-farmable character, there's no shame in using a Tier 2 character selector to lock that pick down like a Heimdall or something like that. Robbie Reyes is great, to ensure that you'll always have an extra Tier 2 character to clear Shadowland to get to that next reward level and that next reward tier, especially 5, 10, and 15. Those are the big ones. And even though you might be using it on a farmable character, the fact that you'll be able to start using them in Shadowland immediately at stage 15, for example, those week by week accrued rewards will outweigh the cost you spent up front of choosing the Tier 2 character selector on a farmable character like a Loki. I'm not saying it's the best option, but it's definitely not a bad option if you're in a rush, if you're trying to get to a very specific tier of rewards, and if you just want to have fun. It's less fun to struggle and say, I'm struggling efficiently, and then 3 months later you have the character, and by then, who knows what's going to happen, versus getting them now, having fun, and getting more rewards currently. And you know, they might always buff the rewards, which then you'll be able to reap again, and who knows after the next one when we're gonna get a third Tier 2 character selector. The last piece of advice I have for you is to just consider Infinity War. Now this one's a little bit looser. This one is probably for like the veterans, the people in my position basically who don't have any characters left to Tier 2. I'm strongly considering Tier 2ing Winter Soldier just for Infinity War. Think about that. It's pretty wild, I know. I'm also strongly considering doing it for War Machine. I like War Machine as a character. I loved him in the comics, but, well, when I read them as a kid. But he's so lame in this game. But who knows? He might become really cool and serviceable after Infinity War if he gets a uniform. I'm basically at that point now where I can make kind of goofy choices for Tier 2s because I have all of the best and the good and the not so good options already Tier 2, and I'm left with, you know, the junk that nobody wanted. But those are my kind of 4-ish tips for you guys for the Tier 2 character selector. I don't want to make it too, and I don't want to stress too much the idea of making the right choice versus the wrong choice. I think there are lots of right choices. I think a general tip for things like Shadowland characters that universals trump other types. So, for example, if you're stuck between Singularity and Shuri, yeah, Shuri's a better character, but Singularity is universal, which means she can do any stage that Shuri can do, plus stages that Shuri can't do, like blast or combat stages, and of course, universal stages. As well for the male types, a Heimdall or a Ghost Rider Robbie Reyes, for example, or even a Hellstorm, because they're universal males, they can do any stage in the game besides villain stages and female stages. So the flexibility offered to you by universal types is very hard to pass up, and it's something that you should consider. Also consider characters that you would traditionally get from honor token chests, like Captain Marvel or Elsa. takes a long time to get those characters to tier 2, and I know you feel like you're getting them for free because of the Chaos or Honor tokens, but you could spend those on other things like the upgrade custom gear chest or the comic card chest. So it does save you a lot of time, and it allows you to shift your resources to collect something else that you need more quickly. So let me know what you guys think of the tier 2 character selector tips. Let me know who you've chosen to upgrade, and also if you can, let me know who I should choose, because I'm still pretty puzzled. I think I know who I'm going to choose, but I'm not quite there yet. Subscribe if you enjoy the content and you want to support me. Hit the bell if you don't want to miss any of my content, and of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.